Добрий день, я вітаю всіх, хто приєднався до нас. Медіа-центр України.
Good afternoon. I want to thank everybody who joined us. The Ukraine Media Center Ukrinform continues its operation, and it's day 275 of the heroic freedom of Ukrainian people, heroic fight of the Ukrainian people for their freedom, and we will be talking about the resumption of the operation of the power grid. Our guest today is Mr. Oleksandr Kharchenko, the director at the Energy Industry Research Center. Mr. Oleksandr, there was another missile strike of the Russians, so blackout happened. So what's the situation as of today? Okay, let's divide the situation into two parts. The first is good part, because the automatic breakers were activated in the system. On one hand, we had blackout, but on the other hand, all our generating capacities can be restarted and their operation resumed. It happened already. Unfortunately, the strike that was inflicted, it led to blackout. It was 50-50. It could not have led to blackout, actually, but it resulted in blackout. The automatic circuit breakers were activated to protect the system against heavier damage. What's happening now is like about 10 to 11 hours after the blackout, the system was brought back to its integrity, to its capacity to operate as the joint system, and now step by step the consumers which were disconnected due to blackout are being reconnected, and the intensity of generation increases for the power supply to the grid. And the key factor is the nuclear power plants. We have approximately 70% of our requirements for the system to supply power to all the consumers. It's about 70% now. All the critical infrastructure is being supplied with power. The key elements of the network keep operating, and they operate in a standard mode. There is still an issue with the lack of capacity, which doesn't enable us to get all the consumers reconnected so far. I can understand the consumers who did not have power for 28 or 30 hours, and then they were reconnected for 3 or 4 hours, but still the generating capacity did not come to the level which enables us to get everybody reconnected. So I think today by night we will reach normal standard capacity, which will mean that we may return to the scheduled power shutdowns, and people at least 16 to 18 hours they receive power. And this is how the things are developing. It's better than we were saying 3 days ago. We have to recognize that the power technicians worked in a faster manner than it is contemplated by the protocols. So do we understand it correct that tomorrow almost everybody may receive power, all the consumers? Well, I don't want to say 100%. There are different technical issues that may arise every 15 minutes, but technically even now all the consumers, including in Kyiv, which is inflicted to the heaviest extent, northern and southern parts of the system are suffering the heaviest damage. I hope that tomorrow Kyiv will have the best power supply coverage. How many time do we need for global resumption that we can say that the system operates in normal mode? And I answer this question frequently, and I can hear how the people who make it with their hands, how they respond to this question. The situation is as follows: to switch to the scheduled power shutdowns when people know for sure, more or less, where their power will be shut down at their locations. We will need from 5 to 7 days. And I'm saying it provided the absence of the new missile strikes. Within about a month, these scheduled power shutdowns may be decreased, and there will be no emergency shutdowns, which we will still have within the week to follow. For example, now there is a weather factor, icing, and it's difficult to work on the lines, on the substations. It's cold, and different additional situations which arise, which we're facing every few hours. So we can say that if there are no new attacks, the situation will become stable. But to fully resume the operation of the grid, we will need a few years. The intelligence, the Central Intelligence Department said that the enemy needs 7 to 10 days to prepare the new attack. And we understand that this is the strategy adopted by the enemy. Unfortunately, this is the strategy they've chosen, and we will have to learn to live with that. And probably the question which concerns everybody, in case of another massive strike, will it result in blackout? Well, you know, it's impossible to forecast. I will give you an example without coordinates, without precise coordinates. But if for example, 3 missiles wouldn't have hit the place they did hit, there would have been no blackout. So the next time the missiles may hit the weak links, or they may not. For example, there are some substations which were hit 10 or 12 times, and they were not hit precisely. The missiles fell to the left or to the right, but not directly. There may be the similar scenario, but there is a softer scenario. So based on my experience, I don't see any negative forecasts. We see that after the last strike, there was intensification of activities of our international partners. Maybe we expect some intensification of support. Well, the international partners are very intended to help. They try to allocate funds to support us, but it's like that they cannot do a lot physically. The transformers, they are absent physically. What's found is being transported to Ukraine. I will not comment either amounts or the speed of delivery, but there are certain amounts of equipment on the way to Ukraine, but objectively they are not enough to rebuild the system and the capacities in full. So there are two focuses in our negotiations with the partners: is the search for new equipment and the expedition of its procurement and transportation. And on the other hand, it's a maximum autonomization, because we gather everything in the world without any exaggeration, in terms of generators of all levels of power that we use to put the cities in safety, in security, to provide the posts, the stations for the people to come to recharge their gadgets and power banks. And there are 3-watt generators that the government uses for these facilities. And there are generators that can be connected to the boiler rooms, to the objects of critical infrastructure, and they help in that case in an efficient manner, because they provide the integrity of the supply, and we may keep people safe from freezing. Dear colleagues, any questions? Michael.
October 9 as a baseline. Today, what percentage of the Ukrainian electrical grid and infrastructure is either not reparable or not replaceable in the immediate term? How far down have we fallen since October 9th?
It's a hard question, which is really hard to answer, because if we will split answer to two parts, one is regional distribution network, which is like last mile, and high voltage network. That high voltage is damaged deeply, really deeply. A regional distribution network out of the front line is quite good condition. It's not hit harder. But if you're talking about high voltage, we lost between 55 and 70% of key element of equipment. It's damaged or destroyed.
So are most of the strikes hitting transmission rather than power generation? Is that fair to say?
Look, problem with generation is clearly connected to transmission. We still have generator, both reactors or boilers or hydro, and they are ready to generate. And main problem now it is transmission system. Even when we are talking about nuclear station, they was out of the system because of transmission, not because they was heated directly. That's the difference and that's the situation.
Пане Олександре, і, мабуть, останнє ще є питання. Прошу.
There are more questions.
Irie with National Public Radio in Washington. Can you talk a little bit about what countries are helping and where your best prospects are for getting assistance? And are we talking days, weeks, months? Just give us some, at least general sense of that outside assistance.
First of all, about terms, we're talking about days and weeks and months. All of them, because in days we could receive some short-term support from Baltic countries, Poland, and some, I could say, ex-socialist countries from Europe, whereas we have part of all the equipment which is absolutely compliant with our network. Second level is the weeks, and here we have a lot of discussion right now around the world one more time, and first of all with Asia and India, as well Turkey, whereas the producers has a lot of compatible with our system equipment which they produce on regular basis. And then months, it means we are talking about procurement of very complicated transformers, which we need a lot, more than a year of volume of regular, in 1 year we don't produce enough transformers to cover Ukrainian needs for 1 year. Now we're in discussion with all producers who is able to produce quickly and all who has something on their lines already to reallocate this equipment to Ukraine. It's a big part of discussion, but anyway, it's a month, even if we success.
Друзі, чи є ще питання? Пане Олександре, щодо наших АЕС, наскільки...
Mr. Oleksandr, regarding our nuclear power plants, how dangerous are the strikes to them? Is there other type of danger, other types of hazards? Well, there is no radiation hazard. There were no hits on the critical equipment of the nuclear power plants or their reactors directly, but nobody can forecast anything in the future because when there is a terroristic state which terrorizes civil population, nobody can forecast their further steps. As of today, there is no radiation hazard. Everything is being thoroughly controlled by everybody, including IAEA, and there is a very strict control over the situation. IAEA recently stated that there is some progress with the negotiations with the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Well, I cannot comment anything. I will be happy to see any positive outcome. Any more questions?
Explain in basic terms with the nuclear plants. It's my basic understanding that if the power systems goes out in a city, even if the nuclear plant is fine, you have to do the emergency shutdown because that electricity can't be transmitted into a system that's been knocked out.
You're absolutely right, but in this case, shutdown means not shutdown of reactor, but shutdown of generation. They switch off the turbine itself, and then they have to repair it, and they need like 36, 80 hours to restart turbine.
Does that, at least temporarily, further reduce the electricity that's available nationwide?
Of course, it's reduce electricity on time when it will be restarted. That's our main problem. Like today we still don't have all nuclears in full capacity in the system, and they are step by step moving up, but they need time. It's just technical precondition.
Пане Олександр, дякую вам за те, що долучилися до нас.
Mr. Oleksandr, thank you for clarification this important issue. I will remind you, visiting us was Oleksandr Kharchenko, the director for research for the Institute of